So how exactly does the subjacency-ish strategy work? Well, the idea, especially if you're trying to, leverage more information out there, the idea is to really pay attention to the structure of these dependencies as defined as these flattened container node sequences, right? So what did she want to do? We can flatten out as to the sequence of phrase structure nodes you have to pass through until you get to the gap. So this is how we define this dependency. What did she want to do, right? So you pay attention to those, and importantly, you're not just treating them as atomic units. You can actually break these into smaller pieces made up of 3 units, which is called a trigram. Whenever you have a sequence of 3 units, that's a trigram, tri for 3. And you can just track the frequency of those in the input you encounter. So let's consider IPVP, that one we just saw. We always have a beginning and an ending sort of signal, right? So we have begin IPVP and then IPVP end. If you just have IP on its own, it's just begin IP end. If you have a longer one, now you're going to break it up into these little groups of 3. So begin IPVP, IPVP IP, VP IPVP, and then IPVP end, right? So you have these little rollout sequence of 4. And for this one, IPVP PP for a prepositional phrase, right? Begin IPVP, that's that first one. IPVP PP, it starts to become a tongue twister here. And then VP PP end, right? And you get this rollout of 3. So you're breaking up these longer things into these little pieces, right? And now you start to get more information about how often the little pieces are appearing, and that's going to be useful, right? So in particular, you can just keep count, like out of all the trigrams that I see, how often do I see this one versus this one versus this one, right? And these are just some made-up frequencies, but it gives you the sense of the kind of thing you can be doing is counting the frequency of these little building blocks, right? And so one thing that's particularly useful is that, certain pieces, little building blocks, appear a lot. Like these actually appear a lot, and that ends up being helpful for helping you figure out what to do with longer dependencies that are made up of pieces that you don't maybe see as often, right? So in particular, you're going to be using this trigram frequency to just calculate the probability of that trigram occurring in any WH dependency you might encounter. So here's again a way of doing it, which is just a straight conversion of how often you are seeing things converted into probabilities, right? And so when you see a new dependency, what you're doing is the same process. You see a new one, you break it into, well, first you characterize it as its sequence of container nodes, you break it into its little trigram building blocks, and then you just calculate its probability based on those trigram building blocks, right? So we can do that for this one. We can do it for super long ones, right? Like what does Jack want to do that for? Is a super long dependency made up of all these different pieces, made up of these 5 building blocks. And hey, we can figure out how probable that is, how good that feels. And obviously longer ones maybe feel less good than shorter ones, and that's just a fact, right? And so now let's look at one of our island crossing ones. Right, so we have this one, which again is pretty long. It's made up of a lot of different pieces. And importantly, some pieces you have never seen. So they have, in this case, 0 probability, or we might give them a very small probability, but they end up with the whole dependency feels bad because some of its pieces you've never seen before, and they feel bad. And that's really the heart of this strategy, is paying attention to the frequency of these building block pieces, these container node trigram units, right? And when you encounter ones you haven't seen before, you like it a heck of a lot less than ones you have seen before, right? So here was a long one, right? Here was a short one, which we like, pretty well. Longer one we like a little less well, but we definitely like it better than another long one that involves pieces we haven't seen before, right? So this is how you can get intuitions for things you haven't seen before. Some you will like better than others.